Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking a deep forensic dive into one of the absolute most astonishing financial black holes in modern history. We're talking about the sudden, shocking collapse of Canada's once largest and most trusted cryptocurrency exchange, QuadrigaCX. We're going to strip away the rumors and look strictly at the data, the digital paper trail, and the undeniable facts that turned a multi-million-dollar tech empire into the ultimate digital ghost story. So prepare yourself, because what we're about to unpack is absolutely going to change how you view digital trust.
Okay, let's dive right into this massive number, $250 million. On January 14th, 2019, 76,000 creditors from all across the globe logged onto their Quadriga accounts. They just wanted to check on their life savings, their retirement funds, their crypto investments. But instead of seeing their account balances, they were met with a terrifying financial blackout. Literally, in the blink of an eye, $250 million in cash and cryptocurrency had just vanished into the ether. No warning, just gone.
And instead of their portfolios, users were greeted by what was basically a digital tombstone. It announced that their founder and CEO, Gerald Cotten, had died weeks earlier. Now, obviously that alone is a tragedy, but the real horror here lay in the actual operational reality of Quadriga. Cotten was the sole director. He was literally a one-man operation, and most chillingly, he was the only person on Earth who held the passwords through the cold wallets, those offline digital vaults that supposedly held everyone's money. Suddenly, these 76,000 users are being told that their funds are locked away permanently behind unbreakable encryption, resting in a grave in Nova Scotia.
Which brings us perfectly to the illusion of trust.
To really understand how a disaster of this magnitude happened, we have to look at the mechanics of the exchange itself, and this brilliantly illustrates the core deception here. Think about the basic promise of blockchain technology. It's a public ledger, it's totally transparent, incredibly secure, and it's built specifically to eliminate the need for centralized, potentially corrupt banks. QuadrigaCX was built and heavily marketed on this exact libertarian, decentralized future. But the actual reality, was a highly secretive, centralized nightmare. There was no board of directors, no corporate oversight, no accounting department, zero contingency plans. It was, for all intents and purposes, a one-man band operating out of an encrypted laptop. Users traded the total transparency of the blockchain for absolute, blind trust in one single human being.
And honestly, you have to ask, who exactly were they trusting? Because here is a massive red flag that only became clear much later. Cotten's co-founder, a man known as Michael Patron, was eventually revealed by investigators to actually be Omar Thanani. And who was Omar Thanani? He was a convicted hacker and money launderer who'd actually served time in a U.S. federal prison for his involvement in an infamous identity theft ring called Shadow Crew. Now, even though Patron claimed he left Quadriga back in 2016, the very foundation of this supposedly secure, trusted platform was undeniably built in partnership with a convicted cybercriminal.
Okay, so let's get into auditing the machine.
When the company officially collapsed and those passwords were lost, the courts sent in the digital forensic teams. Ernst & Young gets appointed to untangle this absolute mess, and they made a discovery so shocking that internal investigators ended up dubbing it Quadbucks. Ernst & Young realized they were looking at a company with no traditional bank accounts and absolutely zero separation between client funds and Cotten's own personal wealth. What they found was that Cotten had literally been minting fake money on his own platform. Since there was no oversight, no accounting system at all, Cotten was simply typing numbers into a database, just creating artificial balances right out of thin air.
So the absolutely crucial point here is how he weaponized those fake balances. The forensic audit uncovered some incredibly specific details about how he pulled this off. It turns out Cotten created 14 fake accounts on Quadriga, giving them these goofy sci-fi aliases like C3PO and R2D2. He then loaded these fake accounts up with millions of his fabricated Quadbucks. And here's the kicker. He used these accounts to trade against his own real customers. Users honestly thought they were buying legitimate Bitcoin or Ethereum from the open market, but they were actually handing over their real cryptocurrency to Gerald Cotten in exchange for his worthless made-up database entries. It was, in pure mechanical terms, operating exactly like a Ponzi scheme.
But wait, what about the encrypted laptop? The one with the missing private keys that started this whole panic? Well, blockchain analysts followed the digital trail and made a staggering discovery. The massive piles of money weren't actually locked away on a laptop at all. They simply didn't exist anymore. Cotten hadn't just lost the keys, he had lost the money itself. He'd been taking his customers' real crypto,
moving it completely off Quadriga and gambling it away on other exchanges in these desperate, failed attempts at arbitrage trading. In fact, months before his death, those so-called secure cold wallets had already been completely drained.
Now, let's take a look at the pre-flight timeline.
When you start mapping out these financial anomalies against the timeline of Cotten's fateful trip to India, a deeply, deeply concerning picture starts to emerge. Watch how this builds. In 2016, his shadowy co-founder reportedly leaves the company. By 2017, the walls are really starting to close in. A so-called glitch allegedly locks away $14 million in Ethereum permanently, and a major Canadian bank freezes $25 million of Quadriga's funds over money laundering concerns. Months before his trip, as we just established, the cold wallets are completely drained. But pay close attention to this final detail. Just 12 days before he died in India, Cotten suddenly filed a detailed will. He left everything to his wife. We're talking a private plane, a 51-foot sailboat, 17 properties, and incredibly, a $100,000 trust fund specifically set up for his 2 chihuahuas. 12 days later, he was dead.
Which leaves us straight into what's known as the Jaipur ghost.
In December 2018, Cotten and his wife arrive in Jaipur, India. It's their honeymoon, and ostensibly they're there to open an orphanage. They check into the ultra-luxurious Oberoi Raj Villas hotel, but within 25 hours of arriving, the CEO was dead. The official medical narrative states that Cotten suffered a massive flare-up of Crohn's disease, leading to a bowel perforation, sepsis, and cardiac arrest. But investigators themselves have publicly labeled the circumstances surrounding his death as, quote, tremendously fishy. For starters, the death certificate issued by a local office actually had his last name misspelled as Cottan. Absolutely no autopsy was ever performed to confirm the exact cause of death. The local embalmer in Jaipur initially refused to even handle the body because the whole situation just felt so irregular to him. And finally, when the body was returned to Canada, the funeral featured a closed casket.
So when you combine the completely drained wallets, the fake trading accounts, the extremely convenient timing of the will, and these bizarre circumstances in Jaipur, it ignited what is known as the digital ghost theory. Creditors started to realize the money wasn't lost, it was stolen, and they began to seriously wonder if Cotten had used a bribe-heavy system in India to fake his own death and just vanish with whatever funds were left. It escalated to the point where lawyers representing the victims made the ultimate demand. They officially requested that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police exhume Gerald Cotten's body to definitively prove, through DNA, that it was actually him buried in that grave.
And that brings us to the infinite loop.
This is really where the story rests today, an unresolved loop in the digital ledger. Right now, 76,000 creditors are essentially just chasing a ghost. Because the funds were completely squandered in a massive fabricated Ponzi scheme, the victims have been left with mere cents on the dollar. Their life savings just evaporated. They trusted the promise of magical internet money. But the tragic irony here is that they ended up trusting a fallible, incredibly greedy human being sitting behind a screen. Analysts noted that Cotten had actually been running internet scams since he was 15 years old. Quadriga was really just the platform that finally allowed his true nature to scale up to $250 million.
And to this day, the body has never been exhumed. The RCMP has not provided the absolute certainty that those 76,000 victims are so desperately craving. So, did a career scammer die a tragic, sudden death in a foreign land? Or in the digital age, where you can delete your search history, encrypt your laptop, and completely change your identity, did he simply pull off the ultimate escape? The blockchain never forgets, but in this case, it only shows us that the money is definitely gone, leaving us all with one final haunting question. Where's the money, Jerry? Thank you so much for watching this explainer. Keep questioning the data and stay curious.